In a city built on peace, darkness learned to breathe. A mother's yard stained red beneath a quiet October sky. A car aflame by Lake Michigan, hiding what love became. A temple's prayers are silenced by bullets and hate. A basement where trust turned into terror. Decades behind bars may quiet the monsters, but the echoes of their crimes still walk streets, whispering that justice ends only when memory forgets to look away. And this is Inside Milwaukee's Most Notorious White Killers, Shocking Murders, and True Crime Cases. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Lauren Spors. A calm Milwaukee morning turned sinister when screams pierced the quiet, breaking the illusion of safety in a neighborhood long untouched by crime. On the 12th of October 2025, police discovered 64-year-old Carrie Zettel dead in her backyard on West Ramsey Avenue. Nearby lay a 4-pound blood-covered rock, the weapon that ended her life. The suspect was her own daughter, 29-year-old Lauren Spors. Prosecutors charged her with first-degree intentional homicide and domestic abuse threat. The murder shocked the community not only for its brutality but also for the years of warning signs that preceded it. Investigators soon learned this tragedy had been years in the making. In 2018, Lauren's father died under circumstances her mother suspected were violent, though no charges followed. After his death, Lauren's mental instability deepened. Carrie sought protection through restraining orders, citing violent threats and property damage. One violation involved Lauren hurling a rock through a window, eerily foreshadowing the crime to come. Courts repeatedly found her mentally incompetent, and she cycled through short-term treatment programs without lasting improvement. Friends said Carrie believed her daughter had schizophrenia but was powerless to force her into care. For 7 years, tension built like a slow-moving storm. Neighbors often heard shouting from the house, police visits became routine. Despite Carrie's efforts to maintain distance, she continued to hope for her daughter's recovery. Weeks before her death, she told a friend she was terrified but resigned, saying perhaps only tragedy could bring change. That morning, Carrie called a friend saying Lauren was outside pounding on her doors. Officers responded and briefly found Lauren hiding under a tarp, but she fled before they could detain her. Hours later, Carrie made another frantic 911 call, reporting that her daughter was acting violently. A witness soon reported a woman standing over another person in the yard, striking repeatedly with a large object. When officers arrived around 2:20 p.m., they found Carrie lying face down in the grass, her head crushed by multiple blows. The rock, roughly 4 pounds, was soaked with blood beside her. Paramedics pronounced her dead at the scene. Lauren was found minutes later wandering nearby, her hands and clothing covered in blood. She was arrested without incident. Evidence from the scene, blood transfer, DNA on the weapon, and witness accounts, confirmed her involvement. Investigators described the killing as an explosion of long-building rage rooted in untreated psychosis and family conflict. Spors was charged and held in Milwaukee County Jail on a $100,000 bond. In November 2025, a judge ruled her incompetent to stand trial, suspending court proceedings. She was committed to the Wisconsin Department of Health and Family Services for treatment, with a review hearing set for February 2026. Many blamed systemic failures, saying she followed every legal step yet remained unprotected from her daughter's instability. 3 lessons remain: unaddressed mental illness invites tragedy, legal measures can't replace intervention, and love alone cannot ensure safety. In the end, mercy met madness, and peace was buried beside hope. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Maxwell Anderson. A quiet April night in Milwaukee became a scene of unthinkable horror when trust met premeditation and a promise of romance ended in mutilation. On the 1st of April 2024, 19-year-old Sade Robinson, a Milwaukee area technical college student studying criminal justice, went on her first and last date with 34-year-old Maxwell Anderson. The following day, she vanished. Hours later, her burned Honda Civic was found abandoned, and by nightfall, fragments of her dismembered body began washing ashore on Lake Michigan. What followed was a case that would come to define brutality and calculation at their most chilling extremes. Robinson had met Anderson through social media, agreeing to meet for dinner at Twisted Fisherman before heading to Duke's on Water. Surveillance video showed them leaving together in her car. Around 9:30 p.m., they arrived at Anderson's home. By midnight, her phone data indicated movement from his residence toward Cudahy's Warnemont Park. At 3 a.m., cameras captured Robinson's car crashing through the park gate. A figure, believed to be Anderson, was seen descending toward the water multiple times before leaving at dawn. At 7:30 a.m., firefighters responded to a vehicle engulfed in flames, Robinson's Honda Civic. Nearby surveillance caught Anderson calmly boarding a city bus and returning home. Hours later, a passerby discovered a severed human leg along the lakeshore. It was identified as Robinson's. In the following weeks, other remains surfaced: an arm, part of a torso, and skin fragments near the burned car. Her head and upper torso were never found. The investigation quickly centered on Anderson. A traffic stop on April 4 led to his arrest. Inside his home, police found blood traces throughout the bedroom and basement. The basement, prosecutors said, had been transformed into a kill room: tarped ceilings, a sanitation sink, 3 saws, and plastic sheeting covering the walls. Digital forensics uncovered deleted photographs showing Robinson's body inside that same basement, including one image jurors described as Anderson's trophy. A confidential informant told investigators that Anderson had bragged about planning to kill a woman weeks earlier, describing in detail how he would dismember and scatter her remains. Prosecutors argued that Anderson's fascination with violent media, including the Netflix series Love, Death, and Robots, inspired his actions. The evidence proved overwhelming. On the 6th of June 2025, a jury found Anderson guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson. Less than an hour of deliberation sealed his fate. On the 1st of August 2025, Judge Laura Crivello sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 9 years for the related charges. Outside the courtroom, grief and outrage merged. Her family established Sade's Voice Foundation to support missing persons cases and advocate for faster response laws for Black women across Wisconsin. 3 lessons remain: unchecked obsession leads to annihilation, evidence never lies, even when the killer does, and one mother's grief can ignite reform. Sade's voice was silenced, but it still reshapes the law. Number 3. Dan Popp. It began with the quiet hum of a Milwaukee apartment complex, then shattered in a storm of gunfire and disbelief. On the 6th of March 2016, residents near 92nd and Beloit were jolted awake by the sound of shots echoing through their building. Within minutes, 3 neighbors were dead. The killer was 39-year-old Dan Popp, a resident of the complex who turned an ordinary Sunday into one of Milwaukee's most haunting multiple homicides. His victims, 40-year-old Jesus Manso Perez and 36-year-old Fia Vu with his 32-year-old wife, Mai Vu, were killed inside their own apartments. Popp's actions would expose a volatile blend of racism, delusion, and untreated mental illness that blurred the line between hate and insanity. The sequence began when Popp encountered Manso Perez and his son on their way to do laundry. After learning they were from Puerto Rico, he reportedly mocked their accent, before moments later, standing at the top of the basement stairs with a rifle. When the pair returned, Popp said they had to go and shot Manso Perez in the head, firing again at his son as he fled. Then, the killer turned his focus to the Vu family upstairs. Fia and Mai Vu had locked themselves in their bedroom after hearing the first gunshots. Popp broke through their door, demanded they come out, and executed Fia at close range. He then dragged Mai and her 2 young daughters to his apartment, where he killed Mai before the children's eyes. When police arrived, Popp emerged calmly with his rifle and surrendered without resistance. Investigators soon learned Popp's perception of reality had fractured long before that night. A military veteran, he had received treatment for severe mental illness and delusional behavior. Friends described his paranoia and belief that his neighbors were robots. Prosecutors charged Popp with 3 counts of first-degree intentional homicide and 1 count of attempted homicide. Questions arose over whether the crime was racially motivated, as he had made remarks about his victim's ethnicity. However, investigators determined no clear hate motive and instead emphasized Popp's psychological instability. His defense attorneys claimed he was legally insane at the time of the killings, suffering from auditory hallucinations and paranoid delusions. In April 2016, Popp was ruled incompetent to stand trial and was committed for psychiatric evaluation. Months later, after treatment and court reviews, he was declared competent. During his 2017 trial, he pleaded no contest but pursued a plea of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. Expert testimony painted him as psychotic but aware of his actions. In November 2017, a jury found him legally sane and fully responsible. On the 23rd of February 2018, Judge Jeffrey Connon sentenced him to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Relatives of the victim spoke of forgiveness mixed with pain. They said the ruling brought peace. 3 lessons remain. Untreated psychosis destroys without warning, hate and delusion often share one mask, and accountability must balance mercy. In the end, 3 lives ended, and one man's mind became his prison. Number 4. Gerardo Jimenez-Rico. A quiet Milwaukee neighborhood erupted in gunfire one January evening when long-held resentment turned a family home into a crime scene. On the 22nd of January 2025, 32-year-old Gerardo Jimenez-Rico shot and killed his 22-year-old sister, Jocelyn Jimenez, and wounded both of his parents inside their home near 40th and Cheyenne Street. Police described the scene as domestic violence at its most tragic form. The attack, which unfolded over minutes, ended years of growing hostility that Jimenez-Rico later claimed was fueled by humiliation over his unemployment. Hours before the shooting, his parents and sister had returned from a month-long trip to Mexico, a vacation he didn't join because he couldn't afford it. Investigators later said this exclusion weighed heavily on him. That evening, he offered to help with their luggage but was dismissed. Tension simmered as the family settled in. According to police interviews, his father confronted him about dirty dishes, triggering a heated argument that quickly escalated. Jocelyn joined in, siding with their father, and moments later, the confrontation turned violent. Jimenez-Rico retrieved a handgun he kept tucked in his waistband. He fired multiple times at his father, striking him in the torso. As his sister rushed forward, holding a kitchen knife, he turned the gun on her, firing 4 rounds. Forensic reports later confirmed bullet wounds to her chest, back, lungs, and arm. When his mother entered the room, he shot her as well, later telling police he didn't mean to, but couldn't explain why he pulled the trigger. When Milwaukee police arrived around 6:45 p.m., they found Jocelyn dead and her mother lying on top of her in what officers described as a protective embrace. A 3-year-old child and a developmentally delayed adult were also inside the home, both unharmed but traumatized. The father and mother were rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Before officers began a full manhunt, Jimenez-Rico walked into Milwaukee's District 1 police station and confessed. During interrogation, he described years of feeling bullied by his family over his inability to find stable work, saying he had finally snapped. Detectives noted that he appeared calm, coherent, and resigned. Based on his confession and corroborating physical evidence, he was charged with 1 count of first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of attempted first-degree intentional homicide. His bond was set at $1 million. Months later, prosecutors negotiated a plea deal. On the 20th of May 2025, Jimenez-Rico pleaded guilty to first-degree reckless homicide for his sister's death, attempted second-degree intentional homicide for his father's shooting, and first-degree reckless injury for wounding his mother. On the 24th of June 2025, a Milwaukee County judge sentenced him to 35 years in prison, followed by 19 years of supervised release. A cousin launched a fundraiser to support funeral costs and ongoing care for surviving relatives, calling the loss sudden and impossible to process. 3 lessons remain: unresolved anger breeds tragedy, help ignored becomes danger, and silence inside homes can echo the loudest crimes. In the end, one family's pain became a city's warning. Number 5. Wade Michael Page. A quiet Sunday morning shattered in seconds when faith, hate, and gunfire collided inside a Wisconsin temple. On the 5th of August 2012, Wade Michael Page, a 40-year-old Army veteran and white supremacist, carried out a mass shooting at the Sikh Temple of Wisconsin in Oak Creek, near Milwaukee. Armed with a legally purchased 9mm Springfield XD-M pistol, he opened fire during morning worship, killing 6 people and wounding 3 others before turning the gun on himself. The FBI later classified the event as an act of domestic terrorism, one of the earliest hate-driven mass shootings in modern U.S. history. The attack began at 10:25 a.m. when Page pulled into the temple's parking lot. He shot 2 worshippers outside before entering the prayer hall, where dozens were preparing for Sunday services. Inside, he moved quickly, firing multiple rounds as panic erupted. Temple President Satwant Singh Kaleka tried to fight back with a simple butter knife, buying time for others to hide, but was shot and killed. 4 victims were found inside the prayer room, 2 outside, men and women ranging from 39 to 84 years old. The first responding officer, Lieutenant Brian Murphy, encountered Page near the entrance. As Murphy issued commands, Page shot him 15 times, leaving him critically wounded on the ground. Despite his injuries, Murphy waved other officers forward to help victims. Seconds later, Officer Sam Linda arrived, firing from a distance and striking Page in the abdomen. Page died at the scene after exchanging gunfire with police, ending the 7-minute rampage. The FBI and Milwaukee Police Department led a full-scale investigation, immediately labeling the attack domestic terrorism. Page's weapon was traced to a July 28 purchase at a West Allis gun shop, obtained legally after he passed a background check. Investigators uncovered his deep ties to the white power music scene, fronting bands like Definite Hate and End Apathy, both promoting racist violence through lyrics and propaganda. His tattoos bore neo-Nazi symbols, including the number 14 and a Celtic cross linked to extremist ideology. Page's background revealed a pattern of isolation and anger. A U.S. Army veteran, he had served from 1992 to 1998 before being discharged for misconduct, including going AWOL and drinking on duty. Afterward, he immersed himself in hate movements and became a vocal member of the Hammerskins, a violent white supremacist group. Over 300 interviews and 200 leads later, the FBI concluded he acted alone. Toxicology reports showed a small amount of alcohol and no drugs in his system. Because Page died at the scene, no trial followed, and the investigation officially closed in November 2012. Vigils drew thousands across Oak Creek and beyond, uniting Sikhs and non-Sikhs in grief. Leaders worldwide condemned the massacre, calling it both a hate crime and a wake-up call to the rise of far-right extremism in America. 3 lessons remain: hatred ignored grows lethal, extremism thrives in silence, and remembrance must outlive fear. In Oak Creek's stillness, healing became resistance. Number 6. Taylor Schabusiness. Evil often begins quietly, a night of trust, a moment of weakness, and a line crossed that can never be undone. In February 2022, 24-year-old Taylor Schabusiness and her friend, 25-year-old Shad Tharian, spent an evening together in Green Bay, Wisconsin. What began as a night of drugs and intimacy ended in tragedy, becoming one of Wisconsin's most disturbing domestic crimes. Prosecutors later described the case as an act that offended human decency and left investigators stunned. That night, Schabusiness picked Tharian up around 9:30 p.m. They met with a friend before returning to Tharian's mother's home, where they continued taking methamphetamine and other drugs. At the time, Schabusiness had removed a court-ordered GPS ankle monitor linked to a prior case. In the early hours of February 22, she told police that the two were engaging in consensual activity when she began to apply pressure around his neck using a chain. She claimed the drugs made her lose awareness of how far things had gone. Moments later, Tharian no longer responded. Instead of calling for help, Schabusiness panicked. Investigators later learned she remained at the scene for hours, attempting to move and conceal evidence. When police arrived 2 days later after Tharian's mother reported a strange odor and missing items, they found traces leading to multiple rooms. Schabusiness was arrested the same day and gave a full confession, stating she didn't mean for it to go that far. Inside the residence, police documented extensive cleanup attempts and recovered evidence later used in court to demonstrate planning and awareness. Detectives also found messages and internet searches on Schabusiness's phone referencing crime shows and past serial cases. During questioning, she spoke erratically, telling officers she had used methamphetamine for several days straight. Toxicology confirmed heavy stimulant use. The defense entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, citing her long-term mental health treatment and bipolar diagnosis. Her attorney argued that she was in a psychotic state triggered by drugs and stress. The prosecution countered with forensic testimony showing she had taken deliberate steps after the incident, including hiding materials and messaging acquaintances. Experts concluded she was legally sane and capable of understanding right from wrong. In July 2023, a jury found Taylor Schabusiness guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, improper handling of human remains, and third-degree sexual assault. The second phase of trial rejected her insanity defense, determining that her actions stemmed from substance abuse, not a permanent mental illness. Judge Thomas Walsh sentenced her in September 2023 to life in prison without the possibility of release, plus 18 additional years for related charges. He called the case beyond comprehension and a lasting scar on the community. The community's reaction was one of disbelief and sorrow. Local residents described the tragedy as a warning about the dangers of drug dependency and untreated instability. 3 lessons remain: drugs amplify danger, untreated mental illness can destroy stability, and awareness must replace denial. Even in silence, the weight of one choice never disappears. Number 7. Nicholas Matzen. Some stories begin quietly, with love turning into fear, and end in silence no one can ever explain. In April 2022, Milwaukee police were called to investigate the disappearance of 23-year-old Emily Rogers, a young mother of 1. Her ex-boyfriend, 35-year-old Nicholas Matzen, had just been released from jail on unrelated charges when he became the prime suspect in her death. What followed would reveal a story of domestic violence, betrayal, and a desperate attempt to cover up a killing that shocked Wisconsin. Matzen was released from jail on April 27, just hours before Rogers was last seen alive. That evening, she messaged a friend saying he had shown up unexpectedly and that she had to force him to leave. It was the last message she would ever send. Prosecutors later revealed that Matzen learned she planned to end their relationship, and in a moment of rage, he strangled her. Witnesses testified that Matzen confessed to 2 different friends that he had lost it. Felix Torres, one of those witnesses, told investigators he helped Matzen hide the body, rolling Rogers in a rug and driving her to an industrial area in Street Francis. Police said Matzen tried to explain the scene away by claiming he was moving a 400-pound mannequin. When Rogers was reported missing on May 1, authorities immediately classified her case as critical, citing concerns for her safety. Her 1-year-old daughter was also missing briefly but later found unharmed. On May 5, after a week of intensive searching, police located Emily Rogers' remains under debris behind a warehouse on South Clement Avenue. The autopsy confirmed death by asphyxia. Investigators quickly connected Matzen to the site through witness statements and digital records. Facebook messages captured Rogers' final hours, showing distress and fear. A neighbor also recalled seeing Matzen with scratches on his face, which he blamed on a dog, though none existed in the home. Matzen was arrested on May 1 for a parole violation and later charged with first-degree reckless homicide and hiding a corpse. During interrogation, detectives tricked him by saying he had been caught on camera moving Rogers' body. He repeated the story about a mannequin but never denied handling a rolled-up object. Prosecutors argued this detail, paired with multiple confessions, proved his guilt. His trial began in March 2025. Felix and Andre Torres testified, recounting Matzen's admissions. He took the stand, claiming innocence and insisting that his earlier confessions were lies created in panic. The jury deliberated for just over 2 hours before finding him guilty on both counts. On the 17th of April 2025, Judge Laura Crivello sentenced Matzen to 45 years in prison followed by 25 years of supervision. The community held vigils honoring Emily, remembering her as a devoted mother and gentle friend. Her father vowed to continue raising awareness about domestic violence to prevent others from suffering the same fate. 3 lessons remain: silence and abuse costs lives, truth surfaces despite denial, and justice may come slowly but steadily. Love should never end in fear. Number 8. Gavino Avalos-Morales. Violence often strikes when ordinary moments turn chaotic, and that afternoon at a youth football game, it changed Milwaukee forever. On the 12th of October 2024, 47-year-old father and community member Racian 2 Cent Barnes attended a children's flag football game at Milwaukee Public Schools South Stadium. He was there simply to support a young player. Nearby stood 30-year-old Gavino Avalos-Morales, who police later identified as the shooter. What began as a weekend family event would end in tragedy, leaving parents and children running for cover. Security footage later reconstructed the events leading up to the shooting. Around 1 p.m., Barnes left the bleachers to grab a water bottle from his car. As he walked down the ramp near the concession stand, 2 men ran past him toward Avalos-Morales and his companion. One man suddenly lunged and punched the friend, sparking a brief fight. Prosecutors noted that Avalos-Morales was not supposed to be at the game and appeared to pull out a concealed firearm during the commotion. Moments later, Barnes, unarmed and uninvolved, was seen raising his hands as if to de-escalate. Avalos-Morales pointed the gun and fired once. The bullet struck Barnes in the torso, and he collapsed to the ground as families screamed and fled. Avalos-Morales and his companion immediately ran from the stadium, leaving behind chaos and confusion. Officers arrived within minutes, finding two spent 9mm casings and a crowd still reeling from the gunfire. Barnes was rushed to a local hospital but later died from his wound. The Milwaukee County Medical Examiner ruled his death a homicide. Detectives began reviewing security footage and quickly identified a white Mazda CX-9 leaving the scene, registered to Avalos-Morales. Ballistic testing through the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network revealed that the same gun used at the stadium had been fired in a previous shooting 5 months earlier on South 10th Street. Video from that earlier case showed a white SUV matching Avalos-Morales' vehicle. This connection helped police track him down. 4 days after the shooting, officers arrested Avalos-Morales. In his phone, investigators found texts to loved ones where he wrote that his life was over, and contact logs showing he had reached out to defense attorneys immediately after the killing. In court, Avalos-Morales faced 3 felony charges: first-degree reckless homicide with a dangerous weapon, discharging a firearm in a school zone, and possession of a firearm on school grounds. He appeared before Milwaukee County Circuit Court on the 21st of October 2024 and later waived his right to a preliminary hearing, allowing the case to proceed to trial. His bond was set between $225,000 and $250,000. If convicted, he faces over 70 years in prison. The shooting shocked the community and prompted immediate reforms. Milwaukee Recreation implemented tighter security measures at youth sporting events, including bag checks and added police presence. 3 lessons remain: disputes resolved with empathy save lives, firearm safety must extend to every public space, and accountability protects families. Even one shot can echo through generations. Number 9. David Pietura. Some crimes shake a city not just for their cruelty but for how they expose what systems fail to protect a child. On the 25th of October 2023, Prince McCree was reported missing from his Milwaukee home. The next morning, police discovered his body inside a dumpster behind a neighborhood bar 1 mile away. The medical examiner ruled his death a homicide caused by multiple blunt force injuries. 2 suspects were charged: 27-year-old David Pietura and Eric Mendoza, who shared the same house as the child's family. That morning, Prince stayed home from school because of a cough. His mother believed he was playing video games in the basement, where Pietura often spent his days. According to Pietura's confession, he walked downstairs to find Mendoza attacking the child. Rather than stopping him, he admitted to helping bind and gag the boy. Investigators later alleged that the pair used household objects during the assault before wrapping Prince's body in garbage bags and discarding it in a nearby dumpster. At around 6 p.m., Prince's mother called the police when he didn't return. Officers responding to the home noticed blood on the basement floor. Pietura tried to cover it with rugs, saying it came from a bloody nose. Police later spotted blood on his leg and detained him for obstruction. A K-9 unit alerted to the smell of decomposition near the basement stairs, where 3 sweatshirts were hanging. Forensic teams also found blood evidence matching Prince's DNA. Surveillance cameras captured Pietura and Mendoza walking in an alley at 2 p.m., carrying a large white bag toward the same dumpster where the body was later found. A detective's review of Pietura's cell phone GPS data showed he lied about being at a park that day. When confronted, Pietura confessed, claiming Mendoza had long expressed violent thoughts and that he joined only to help clean up. Mendoza's own confession later followed after being shown the footage. During the investigation, police uncovered another series of crimes. Days before the killing, Mendoza had allegedly stabbed 3 strangers, saying he felt a rush. This deepened the horror of what authorities described as pure and deliberate violence. In June 2024, Pietura pleaded guilty to first-degree intentional homicide. Prosecutors dismissed but read into record charges of physical abuse of a child causing death and hiding a corpse. Judge Gene Keese sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of release. Mendoza, tried as an adult, remains in custody on a $500,000 bond. His lawyers seek to transfer the case to juvenile court ahead of a 2026 trial. The community's reaction was one of devastation. Prince's parents, wearing necklaces with his ashes, described him as a bright, joyful boy who loved superheroes and school. Lawmakers responded by passing the Prince Act, signed by Governor Tony Evers, expanding emergency alerts for missing children under 10 who don't meet Amber Alert criteria. 3 lessons stand clear: early intervention saves lives, silence in homes enables tragedy, and policy born from loss can protect others. Justice can't revive innocence, but it can remember it. Number 10. Jeffrey Dahmer. He was one of America's most infamous serial killers, but his end came not at trial, nor by the law, but within the prison walls he once mocked. On the morning of the 28th of November 1994, inside Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin, Jeffrey Dahmer, known worldwide as the Milwaukee Cannibal, was assigned to a work detail cleaning the prison gym bathroom alongside 2 inmates, Christopher Scarver and Jesse Anderson. What followed would mark the violent closing chapter of one of the darkest stories in American criminal history. Jeffrey Dahmer had been convicted in 1992 of killing 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991, crimes involving sexual assault, necrophilia. He was serving multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. Behind bars, Dahmer reportedly displayed a morbid sense of humor that disturbed both guards and prisoners. According to later interviews, Dahmer often shaped prison meals into mock body parts, covering them with ketchup to mimic blood. He allegedly joked about his crimes, leaving fake limbs in places others would find them, behavior that fueled tension among inmates. Christopher Scarver, who was already serving a life sentence for murder, later told investigators that Dahmer's actions crossed the line. On that November morning, Dahmer, Anderson, and Scarver were left unsupervised for about 20 minutes while performing cleaning duties in a bathroom near the gym. At approximately 8:10 a.m., guards discovered Dahmer lying on the floor, severely beaten with a 20-inch metal bar taken from exercise equipment. His head had been struck repeatedly and slammed against the wall. He was rushed to a nearby hospital but was pronounced dead an hour later. Anderson, found in a nearby area, also suffered fatal injuries and died 2 days later. Scarver was quickly located, unarmed and calm, in a different section of the prison. He later stated he had concealed the weapon in his clothing and that he acted alone. When questioned, Scarver said that Dahmer's lack of remorse and offensive jokes had angered both inmates and staff. Though he initially claimed divine instruction, he later described the act as spontaneous rather than premeditated. Dahmer reportedly offered no resistance, saying nothing as he was attacked. The investigation confirmed that the 3 men had been left unattended by correctional officers, a lapse in security that drew scrutiny. The Columbia Correctional Institution Administration launched an internal review, and the Wisconsin Department of Corrections classified the case as a homicide by blunt force trauma. Scarver was later sentenced to 2 additional life terms for the killings of Dahmer and Anderson. He continues to serve his sentence in a different facility. Dahmer's mother, Joyce Flint, reacted with outrage to the news, asking the media if his brutal death made anyone happy. The district attorney who prosecuted Dahmer publicly reminded the public that even this act was still murder. 3 lessons stand out: unchecked cruelty breeds more violence, security failures cost lives, and justice without order destroys itself. Evil ends as it begins inside silence and consequence. These crimes left scars that outlasted headlines, families shattered, laws rewritten, and a community forced to confront what it ignored too long. But the story doesn't end here. Milwaukee's past still whispers through courtrooms, alleyways, and forgotten files, waiting to be reopened. The next name, the next secret, might already be unfolding right now. If you believe every truth deserves a voice, don't look away. Subscribe to Justice Reversed, tap the bell, and be first to uncover the next chapter, where real crimes meet real justice.